Welcome to Miss Craftsalette's Lair. I am Barbie, your resident polycraft, and today we are not going to be touching on the previous paper crafting or yarny stuff that I tend to do, but today we are going to be working on a patchwork, the front of a quilt. Now, while I was reorganizing my fabric stash not that long ago, I got to thinking about a quilt that I made. Here is the front of the quilt without the backing or the batting in it, but I really like this quilt, but I ended up giving it to the wrong person. Insta regrets. So many regrets. So while I was reorganizing and such my fabric stash, I came across these two fabrics that I think would be perfect for recreating said quilt. Here is the quilt face that I am speaking of. This was before it got its backing and its batting and all quilted up and nice. And so I'm thinking that these two fabrics would go really nice in a recreation of that same, in a similar quilt style. That is until I went shopping with my husband and this fabric jumped into my cart. As anybody who knows me personally knows, I cannot resist my trucks. And so this 2.5 yards of this jumped into my cart. I was going to say into my quilt. That was incorrect. So 2.5 yards of this jumped into my cart, and So today I went to my local Walmart because as this jumped into my cart, coordinating fabrics did not. So today I went and grabbed a yard of the black and 2 yards of the red. So now all I have to do is start prepping these fabrics to make my quilt, and why don't we get to that? Whoever came up with that saying, better late than never, must have been one of my ancestors, because I have had these fabrics washed, refolded, pressed nicely for a year and 5 months. So I suppose now is a good time for me to get to this project, right? So I have my cheat sheets here, and I have done all of the math to figure out how many strips of what and well to do for this project, so I might as well jump in, right? Now for some quilting math. Generally speaking, fresh fabric off of the bolt is 42 inches wide. Of course, this could change if you pre-wash and dry your fabric before cutting it. I personally find I like the resulting quilt better when I prep my fabric like this. To figure out how many strips of each size I'll need per size of block, I divide the width of the fabric, in this case 42 inches, by the block widths. Saying I needed 13 of the 9.5-inch squares, I cut 4 strips of 9.5-inch, saying that I can get 4 blocks from each strip. I needed 48 3.5-inch squares from the truck fabric, so I cut 4 strips of 3.5 inches because I can get 12 blocks per strip. Because only a limited amount of people really want to fiddle with 1.5-inch squares of the red and black, this is simplified by sewing together 1.5-inch strips of full width fabric together, then going back and cutting those strips down to 1.5 inch. You can get up to 28 1.5-inch squares per 42 inches. I needed 120 red and black red strips and 60 black red black strips to make my quilt. I needed to cut 10 strips of red and 5 strips of black for the red, black, red strips, and I needed 6 of black and 3 strips of red for the black, red, black. Yeah, this got me some leftovers for my cabbage patch. Now you can take that math and figure in that I used 1.45 yards of the truck fabric, 1.16 yards of red, and 0.46 yards of black. Of course, this is without factoring in the fabric that I need for the frame and backing later. So then it was up to sewing the red and black strips together in order to get those all sewn up so then I could get those pressed and cut. But of course I had to have an issue with my machine where I had to take stuff apart and futz around with it before I could continue. I am fairly certain that in every sewist's life, there is that time where you have to dissect your machine in order to get stuck thread out. So to fill you in a little bit on this particular machine, this machine was handed down to me from my mother-in-law, trying to figure it out. I do realize though now that you have to have the bobbin going in the right place, in the right direction, just so. Otherwise, it messes up. I've had to rip out too many stitches already. But I got back on track and continued on with my sewing of 1.5 inch strips, which is the way I spent the remainder of this evening. Now, I'm not going to say that I forgot how to press quilting blocks and such, quilt strips, or whatever you want to call them, but I am saying that I had to sit here and think for a second on how to do it. It's been a while. Well, it has been. So I'm here to say, do as I say, not as I do. You are supposed to lift up, press down, lift up, press down, not drag your iron like I was doing there. And then it was off to put the third strip on the red, black, red, or black, red, black to make the 1.5 inch strips. Before I left last night to go eat dinner, I did manage to get all of my triple strips sewn and pressed. I do need to get a couple of the strings because this is a very, the way I cut my fabric, it's very stringy and it kind of likes to get into the sewed bits. So it's just a matter of going into the seam and pulling it from the wrong side. However, I do want to point out that I made quite an interesting oops. So this, I was pressing this particular piece, and I was trying to figure out why I couldn't press quite as well. So I ended up sewing on the wrong side. So I ended up redoing that one because I wasn't about to sit and rip out that whole line of stitches. Because like I said, it is a very kind of, the way I cut the fabric, it kind of frays a bit more. Um, that might be an extra video later. Um, Testing out another method of cutting the fabric. So that might be something for a future video. Anywho, so now I get to cut these guys into 1 inch or 1.5 inch strips. Yeah, and then I get to cut the truck fabric as well. So more cutting. That I did press my fabric again here, making it nice and smooth so that way hopefully my cuts are more accurate. I started off by cutting the 9.5-inch blocks. And then I started cutting the 3.5-inch blocks. And then I started on the 1.5-inch strips. And this is the part of the show where I remind you that this is not a tutorial. This is just me trying to figure out a machine by using a quilt pattern that I have used many, many moons ago, a very hot minute ago. So, that being said, if you are a master quilter, please be gentle in the comments. Thank you. Like I said, getting used to a new machine. And then returning to this machine, I realized that the working bobbin thread completely decided to come off of the threading, so therefore I had to rethread the entire machine again. Yay! And then I sewed the 1.5-inch strips together. First it was 2 strips, and then I went on to make 3 strips of those, making those cute little checker patterns. It is much easier to sew these third strip on if they were not all sewn together already. So off camera I am cutting those apart, so it will be easier for me to sew. And now it's time to sew a 3.5-inch checkerboard piece to a 3.5-inch truck piece. And then depending on whichever part of the, or whichever strip of the 9 patch I am doing, it either gets another little mini 9 patch or it gets another 3.5-inch truck piece. And then it is those strips of 3 that are sewn together alternating, so therefore you have the 9 patch squares. And it was about this time that I started realizing that things were not going the way that I had intended. Again, not an expert, not a tutorial. Um, it's gonna turn out very interestingly. Things are not lining up, but I'm okay with that because this was, like I said, not supposed to be a perfect project. It was going to be a project for me to get used to the new to me sewing machine. Anyway, kind of blah. Nah, keep on going. Okay, so somehow, even though the 9 block squares are kind of funky, they seem to be the right size for the full 9.5 inch square. So I don't know where I went wrong, but it went wrong. So then I continued on sewing a 9 block to a 9.5 inch solid quilt square. Okay, I am gonna head to bed, but I got all 5 of my rows done. So I just need to come down tomorrow and sew them all together. I do not have enough of the black fabric to do the border for the front or the back at all. Um, so it's just going to be 5 strips until for a couple weeks. But I will at least have the 5 rows sewn together. So I think it would look better with a black border and black background back. So that's why I am going to do that. But as I got farther along, I did start to get the feel for the machine better and kind of remembering how to do the actual like stitching and such. So things started looking a little bit more even. I do have some like strings that need to be taken care of, but like for instance here, I think that black came out fairly nice. Still, like see, oh, look at how pretty that one is. Um, so excuse me. So I think I have gotten my groove back. My eldest saw one of the strips and was like, "Ooh, you're rusty." So I'm getting there. Um, this machine is really interesting. I'm getting used to the automatic needle down because my older machine, which is right now being the holder for the 5, but my older machine here, pardon my mess, but this did not have the automatic down. So when I was working on like my corn pillows now being transferred over to rice pillows, I would have to manually make sure that the needle was down so that I could pivot the bag so that, to continue the seam around. So I think, oh, excuse me, I am actually really happy that this machine has the automatic needle down because then I don't have to worry about like remembering to put the needle down to twist it. So yay. Um, and I think I'm getting used to its personality, may I say. Um, Still have to name it. Everything in my room has a name, so it does need a name still. So, yeah, I am going to close up shop for the night and be back in the morning. It's day 3, and this is where I decided that pinning is probably a good thing. Um, Not a short little 3.5 inch span. Now it's going to be 45 inches of span, basically. So pinning would be a good thing. And I sewed 2 strips of the 5 block strips together, and I continued that on for the entire front of the quilt. Okay, so it is done. Ish, sort of. A close kin to a only a or a face only a mother could love is a saying that goes better admired from a distance. That's kind of where we are with this particular quilt. It makes me look like I never quilted before. It looks like I've never done patchwork before, and I have. Oh, I have. Um, Things I have learned. I have learned about my machine some more. Yay. I have also learned that um, there are some pieces on the machine that I think I might want to get extra replacements of just in case, because the amount of times that I had to, mainly being the bobbin cover case, it's a cute little plastic piece. And the amount of times that I had to take it off and put it back on during this project makes me think that it probably would be a good idea to have one, maybe two extras hanging around just in case, because I can foresee the little plastic piece on that snapping off with as much as I had to take it off. And it wasn't taking it off because things were broken or anything. It was a take it off to fix the bobbin because it was squeaky at first. And then it was a reload of the bobbin twice. So I'm thinking that it will be probably a good idea for me to buy that extra piece. If you have a brother, I will post the model number here. Um, if you have one, can you please let me know if you have had any problems with any particular parts on it? Um, I know that now she's probably about 6 years old. Maybe, yeah, about 6 years old. So if you have one of these, and you have any tips, tricks, or general feedback on it, I would greatly appreciate it. Um, Things that I will be doing, I have not done yet, but I'm thinking probably would have been a good idea to first off measure for sure the 1/4 inch on the machine. I have the quilting foot on it now that is aftermarket, which is another learning thing because I'm having to make sure that I put the needle in the right spot when I start the machine, kind of jazz, to keep it from breaking needles or creating some other unforeseen havoc that I don't want to see. We're going to leave that unknown because I don't want to know what happens if you ram your presser foot needle into your presser foot. That's not on my bucket list. So I am going to measure that to make sure that where my 1/4 inch foot I'm actually measuring on the right spot. I think that was part of the issue. Another part of the issue, I think, was the fact that I rushed cutting the fabric just a little bit. Um, so I am going to be taking better care of that. Like I said, not my first quilts. It's been a while though. It has been probably, I'm looking at 12, 13 years, maybe even 14 since I last made a quilt. So I am definitely rusty. Um, so I am not giving up. And like I said, this is not my first quilts. I had some really good experiences prior, especially with the same exact quilt pattern. So I am chucking up to using a new machine and also being rusty because I have not quilted in ages. So that being said, I'm going to do it again. Have I learned anything else? I don't believe so. Um, not a bad not a bad time frame to do it. I just do think that I need to take just a tad bit more time, and I think I might also need a little bit more practice on this machine as far as the seaming goes, and the measurements of the seaming. So, yeah, I think it was a win for the fact that I was able to learn about my machine some more, and it's definitely going to get the backing and um, it's definitely going to be getting the framing edging. Oh, yeah, yeah. It's definitely going to be finished. That is what I'm trying to spit out of my mouth. Um, just, it's going to be on a side burner, not back burner, but it's going to be on a side burner for a couple weeks until I can get more fabric. So, um, I hope that you liked this video. If you did, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. There will be more videos like this, and also more videos on sewing, and more videos on crochet and knitting. There's going to be more videos. So if that's something that you like, be sure to subscribe, hit the bell for notifications of when I do post, and I will be back again soon. Until next time, bye!